For over a decade, China watched American railgun programs consume billions in funding while delivering nothing but spectacular test range videos. Every few years, the U.S. Navy would release footage of a railgun hurling projectiles at hypersonic speeds, accompanied by promises that the technology would revolutionize naval warfare. Then the program would quietly stall, delayed by insurmountable technical challenges. The railgun needed too much power, destroyed its own barrel after a few dozen shots, and could not fire accurately beyond laboratory conditions. Beijing's state media ran gleeful commentaries about the American obsession with wonder weapons that never left the testing phase. Chinese admirals dismissed the railgun as a technological fantasy, a weapon that defied the laws of physics and economics. While the United States chased electromagnetic dreams, China built practical hypersonic missiles, mass-produced destroyers, and fielded weapons that actually worked. The message was clear. America had lost its way, investing in science fiction while China focused on deployable hardware. Then something changed in a shipyard in San Diego. The USS Zumwalt, already transformed into a hypersonic missile platform, was about to receive another upgrade. This time, the weapon that had failed for years was ready. Not as a replacement for conventional guns, but as something far more dangerous. A defensive system so fast and so precise it could shoot hypersonic missiles out of the sky. What made the impossible suddenly possible? And why did the railgun that China mocked as vaporware become the weapon that rendered their most advanced missiles obsolete before they even reached their targets? In 2008, the U.S. Navy unveiled a railgun prototype at the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Dahlgren, Virginia, that could fire a projectile at 5,600 miles per hour. The demonstration was stunning. A 23-pound slug accelerated down a pair of electromagnetic rails, emerging from the barrel with enough kinetic energy to punch through steel plate like tissue paper. The weapon used no gunpowder, no chemical propellants, just pure electrical energy converted into velocity. In theory, this meant unlimited ammunition as long as power was available, no explosive magazines to worry about, and projectiles that could reach targets over 100 miles away in seconds. The Pentagon immediately saw the potential. A railgun could engage incoming missiles, aircraft, and surface targets with a rate of fire and cost per shot that made conventional weapons look obsolete. Each projectile cost roughly $25,000, compared to millions for a missile interceptor. The math was seductive. Shoot down a $2 million cruise missile with a $25,000 slug, and defense suddenly became economically sustainable. The Navy poured money into development, setting a goal of fielding an operational railgun by 2025. But reality had other plans. The first problem was power. A single shot required 25 megawatts of electrical energy, roughly enough to power 19,000 homes for a second. No ship in the fleet could generate that kind of power without shutting down propulsion, radar, and life support. The Navy looked at nuclear-powered carriers and submarines, but even they struggled to divert enough electricity without compromising core systems. Every test firing required massive capacitor banks to store energy, equipment so large it filled entire buildings. The second problem was barrel life. Electromagnetic rails subjected to that much energy eroded catastrophically. After 20 to 30 shots, the rails warped, cracked, and lost the precision needed for accurate fire. Replacing the barrel was not a simple swap. It required machining new rails to tolerances measured in microns, realigning the entire system, and recalibrating the fire control computers. In combat, where ships might need to fire hundreds of rounds, a weapon that needed a rebuild after every few dozen shots was useless. Guidance was another nightmare. Unlike missiles with onboard seekers, railgun projectiles were dumb. They flew ballistic trajectories, meaning any error in the firing solution compounded over distance. At 100 miles, a fraction of a degree error in barrel elevation meant missing the target by hundreds of meters. The Navy experimented with guided projectiles, adding fins and small course correction systems, but the G-forces during launch, often exceeding 30,000 times Earth's gravity, destroyed most electronics. Components that survived on the test bench shattered when subjected to the brutal acceleration of an actual firing. By 2017, progress had stalled. Congress grew impatient, demanding to know why the Navy had spent over $500 million with nothing to show but more prototype tests. Congressional hearings turned confrontational, with lawmakers questioning whether the technology was even achievable. Defense analysts wrote articles declaring the Railgun program a cautionary tale about overinvestment in immature technologies. The Navy quietly scaled back funding, shifting resources to more conventional systems that work today, not in some hypothetical future. Chinese military observers seized on the failures with satisfaction. Articles in People's Liberation Army journals cataloged every setback, every blown capacitor, every eroded barrel. One widely cited 2019 analysis in a Beijing defense publication dismissed the railgun as typical American hubris, an attempt to solve tactical problems with technological miracles instead of sound doctrine and proven weapons. The author argued that China's approach, focused on mass-producing reliable systems like the DF-21D and DF-26, was strategically superior to chasing electromagnetic fantasies. Beijing's confidence was not entirely unjustified. Chinese researchers had pursued their own railgun programs, encountering the same fundamental challenges. In 2018, photographs surfaced showing what appeared to be a railgun prototype mounted on a Chinese landing ship, sparking speculation that the People's Liberation Army Navy had achieved a breakthrough. But subsequent years brought no evidence of operational deployment, no test firings, and no integration into fleet exercises. The Chinese program, like its American counterpart, had run into physics problems that money and political will could not overcome. Western critics piled on. Think tank reports questioned whether directed energy and electromagnetic weapons were worth continued investment. Some voices argued the Navy should abandon exotic technologies and focus on proven kinetic systems, citing the railgun as Exhibit A in the case against revolutionary weapons. The weapon that was supposed to change naval warfare had become a punchline, a symbol of American technological overreach. But while the headlines declared the railgun dead, a quieter revolution was underway. The engineers at General Atomics and BAE Systems had not given up. They had learned from every failure, refined their designs, and made incremental breakthroughs that never made the front page. The problem had never been whether a railgun could work. It was whether it could work on a ship with the electrical and structural capacity to support it. And in 2022, a ship with exactly those capabilities was sitting in San Diego, waiting for a mission that could justify its existence. The USS Zumwalt was built around an integrated power system that generated 78 megawatts of electricity, more than any surface combatant in history. Most of that power was intended for the advanced gun system, a weapon that never worked as planned. But the electrical infrastructure remained, a massive generation and distribution network capable of delivering energy anywhere on the ship at a moment's notice. When the Navy removed the failed gun systems and installed hypersonic missile launchers, they left behind a ship with excess power capacity and empty deck space. That combination was exactly what the railgun program needed. In late 2023, the Navy announced a new initiative, Project Overmatch. The goal was to integrate a next-generation railgun onto the Zumwalt-class destroyers, leveraging their power systems and stealth to create a defensive capability unlike anything in the fleet. This would not be the massive ship-killing weapon originally envisioned, but something more tactical and more immediately useful. A point defense railgun designed to intercept hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles, and aircraft at ranges conventional systems could not touch. The redesigned railgun, designated the Electromagnetic Kinetic Interceptor, or EMKI, was smaller than earlier prototypes but far more refined. The barrel measured just 20 feet, short enough to mount on the Zumwalt's forward deck without interfering with other systems. The projectiles were lighter, weighing only 10 pounds, but they flew at speeds exceeding Mach 7. At that velocity, kinetic energy alone was enough to destroy incoming threats. The interceptor did not need explosives. It just needed to hit. The breakthroughs came in materials science and power management. Engineers at General Atomics developed a new barrel coating using advanced ceramics and carbon composites that could withstand hundreds of shots without significant degradation. The rails themselves were made from a tungsten-copper alloy that dissipated heat more effectively than previous designs. Firing tests at the Dahlgren range showed the new barrels lasting over 400 shots before needing replacement, a 20-fold improvement over earlier versions. Power management was solved by integrating the railgun directly into the Zumwalt's electrical grid. Instead of relying on capacitor banks that took minutes to charge, the EMKI drew power continuously from the ship's turbines. Advanced power electronics allowed the system to store just enough energy for a single shot, fire, and immediately begin charging for the next. The result was a rate of fire approaching 10 rounds per minute, fast enough to engage multiple incoming threats in rapid succession. Guidance was addressed with a two-part solution. The projectile itself remained unguided, keeping costs low and avoiding the electronics fragility problem. Instead, the fire control system became extraordinarily precise. The Zumwalt's AN/SPY-3 radar, one of the most advanced in the world, could track incoming missiles with centimeter-level accuracy. Advanced algorithms predicted the target's trajectory, accounting for wind, atmospheric density, and even the Earth's rotation. The railgun's barrel adjusted in real time, aiming with a precision measured in fractions of a degree. By the time the projectile left the barrel, it was already on an intercept course. The first live fire test took place in March 2024 at the Pacific Missile Range facility in Hawaii. The target was a BQM-177 supersonic drone, simulating a cruise missile traveling at Mach 2.5 at low altitude. The Zumwalt's radar acquired the EZI target 60 miles out, tracking its approach. At 25 miles, the fire control system calculated an intercept solution and cued the railgun. The weapon fired with a crack that echoed across the range. 3 seconds later, the drone disintegrated in midair, struck by a 10-pound projectile moving at Mach 7. The debris fell into the ocean. The test was flawless. The second test was even more ambitious. The target was a simulated hypersonic glide vehicle, a rocket-boosted missile that climbed to 80,000 feet before releasing a maneuvering warhead that dove toward the surface at Mach 5. The scenario replicated a DF-17 attack profile, the exact threat the Chinese DF-21D system was built around. The Zumwalt tracked the launch, identified the glide vehicle separation, and engaged during the terminal phase. The railgun fired twice in rapid succession. The first shot missed by meters, but the second struck dead center, obliterating the warhead before it could complete its dive. The engagement took less than 20 seconds from detection to destruction. The implications were immediate and profound. For years, hypersonic missiles were considered nearly invulnerable. They flew too fast for conventional interceptors, maneuvered unpredictably, and struck before defenses could react. But the railgun changed the equation. A projectile traveling at Mach 7 was faster than the missile it targeted. There was no chase geometry, no need to lead the target. The interceptor simply placed itself in the path of the incoming warhead, and physics did the rest. The collision released so much energy that both objects vaporized instantly. The cost per kill was revolutionary. A single EMKI projectile cost $30,000 to manufacture, roughly 1/100th the cost of an SM-6 interceptor. The Zumwalt could carry thousands of projectiles in its magazines, enough to defend against sustained missile barrages that would exhaust conventional defenses in minutes. The economic advantage was overwhelming. China could launch 100 DF-17s, and the Zumwalt could shoot down everyone for less than the cost of a single F-35. The psychological impact on Chinese strategists was equally devastating. The DF-17 and DF-21D were supposed to be unstoppable, weapons so fast and so unpredictable that American ships would be forced to stay thousands of miles from the Chinese coast. But a destroyer armed with a railgun could sit 500 miles offshore, confidently engaging every incoming missile without fear of magazine depletion. The entire anti-access strategy, built on the assumption that volume would overwhelm defenses, collapsed in the face of a weapon that could fire faster than China could launch. The operational concept evolved rapidly. The Zumwalt would operate as an advanced picket positioned between the carrier strike group and the threat axis. When Chinese missiles launched, the Zumwalt's radar would detect them during the boost phase, tracking them through space and into their terminal glide. As the DD missiles descended, the railgun would engage, firing multiple projectiles per target to ensure kills. The ship's stealth kept it off Chinese targeting systems, meaning the defenders would not even know where the intercepts were coming from. Missiles would simply disappear, and the mystery would compound the fear. Integration with other platforms multiplied the effectiveness. Aegis destroyers equipped with SM-3 and SM-6 interceptors could handle mid-course engagements, while the Zumwalt's railgun provided terminal defense. F-35s could feed targeting data from over the horizon, cueing the railgun before the Zumwalt's own sensors even saw the threat. Submarines could strike missile launchers on the ground, reducing the number of incoming threats, while the Zumwalt handled whatever got through. The system was layered, resilient, and brutally efficient. The rate of fire became a force multiplier. In simulations, a single Zumwalt engaged 47 incoming hypersonic missiles over a 12-minute period, destroying 45. The two that got through were engaged by secondary systems. In a real conflict, multiple Zumwalt-class ships could create overlapping fields of fire, ensuring that no missile reached the high-value assets they were protecting. The carrier strike group, once considered vulnerable, became a fortress protected by electromagnetic shields that moved at hypersonic speeds. Chinese engineers scrambled to find countermeasures. Discussions in People's Liberation Army research institutes focused on overwhelming the railgun with sheer volume, launching so many missiles that even a perfect defense would be saturated. But the math did not work. A Zumwalt firing 10 rounds per minute could engage 600 targets in an hour. China did not have 600 missiles positioned and ready to launch simultaneously, and even if they did, the logistics of coordinating that kind of salvo were staggering. Other proposed countermeasures included decoys, chaff, and electronic warfare, but none addressed the fundamental problem. The railgun projectile did not rely on guidance that could be jammed or confused. It flew a ballistic path calculated by the fire control system. As long as the radar track was accurate, the projectile hit. Decoys and chaff might confuse missile seekers, but they did not fool physics. The interceptor did not care if the target was real or fake. It destroyed everything in its path. Beijing's confidence in the DF-17 and DF-21D began to erode. State media, once eager to showcase the carrier-killer missiles, grew noticeably quieter. Articles that once declared American defenses hopeless now discussed the challenges of penetrating layered systems. The tone shifted from swagger to caution, acknowledging that the electromagnetic railgun was not the failure they had assumed. Some Chinese analysts admitted that dismissing the technology had been a strategic mistake, and catching up would require years of research and investment. The U.S. Navy accelerated. Deployment. By late 2025, all 3 Zumwalt-class destroyers were equipped with the EMKI system, each ship carrying over 2,000 railgun projectiles in dedicated magazines. The ships operated in rotation, ensuring at least one was always on station in the Western Pacific. The mere presence of these vessels changed Chinese planning. Missile barrages that once seemed overwhelming now looked like expensive failures waiting to happen. Allied nations took notice. Japan and Australia both requested briefings on the technology, exploring whether the EMKI could be adapted for their own ships. The goal was to create a networked defense across the Pacific, where multiple nations contributed railgun-equipped platforms to a shared defensive umbrella. If Japan could field even 2 railgun-equipped destroyers and Australia another, the combined firepower would make missile attacks against Allied assets prohibitively expensive. The transformation of the railgun from failed experiment to operational game-changer mirrored the Zumwalt's own journey. Both were written off as expensive mistakes, technologies that promised much but delivered little. But when paired together, leveraging the ship's unique power generation and the weapon's refined design, they created a capability no adversary had planned for. The failure became the foundation for success, proving that innovation often requires patience and the willingness to learn from setbacks. Right now, a Zumwalt-class destroyer patrols the Pacific, its railgun systems charged and ready. The ship that was supposed to be a billion-dollar embarrassment has become the platform that redefined naval defense. China's hypersonic missiles, perfected over decades and paraded as unstoppable, face a weapon that shoots them down for the cost of a luxury car. The carrier killers are no longer killers. They are targets. The laughter that once echoed from Beijing has been replaced by the silent realization that the weapon they mocked works better than anything they built to counter it. The railgun that could never succeed just made China's most advanced offensive systems strategically irrelevant. The balance of power, built on the assumption that speed meant invulnerability, has been shattered by electromagnetic physics and American persistence. When the technology matures at the right time on the right platform, yesterday's failure becomes tomorrow's revolution. And the ship that delivered it was hiding in plain sight, waiting for its moment. What do you think? Has the railgun truly changed the game, or will China find a way to overwhelm it? Drop your thoughts below.